All right, and welcome back to the Prometheus Afterthoughts podcast, the podcast where we typically talk to the person most recently booted from the game. But in this case, we are talking about the second place finisher, Kyle. Kyle, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's kind of nice that the season's over with now, because I can kind of just step back from it all. But actually, in reality, I'm not because I'm diving right into season two. And as of filming this, we'll be releasing it tomorrow. But by the time this actually gets released, it will already have been released for like a day or so. The applications for season two, that is.
Okay. I thought you meant like the first episode. I was like, my dude is working.
No. No, we have not gotten to that. It's definitely been a roller coaster, and hopefully season two will come out a little bit more quickly. But also, personally, I'm in no rush because we release a fair amount of content, two podcasts, the episode, as well as at least one extra thing each week, which is typically on the cutting floor. But anyway, it's not about me; it's all about you. So whenever you want, you're more than free to talk about your experience, your edit, the podcast, whoever, whatever. So yeah, you're free.
Well, what I want to do is talk about you. So it's not, the spotlight's not leaving you yet.
Okay.
I want to just shout you out because you put so much work into this, and I feel like it can never be overstated how much you put into this. Like this was incredible. I've never done anything like this. I've never done this short of a game or a game that makes episodes. And I was like, how the fuck are they going to put an episode together from like 2 days worth of footage? Like, that's not going to, I thought like maybe it'll be like a movie, like a short film or something, but no, you crushed it. You put out a legit, like seasons worth of episodes and extra content, and the podcasts have been excellent. So just, I feel proud of yourself. Cause this is far exceeded my expectations.
Well, thank you.
Of course. Now it's time to talk about me.
All right, it's all about you now.
Yeah, compliment me now. No, I guess. I mean, in general, I had a super good time playing this. I learned a lot. The fact that I've never really watched myself back, and I never got to watch the conversations people had about me, like because I usually play the longer term orgs, so I would go back and watch confessionals, and I could watch what people thought about me. But I never got to watch the conversations that people had about me when I wasn't there. And that was enlightening to see how my gameplay was perceived amongst the other players when they're having conversations with each other and everyone's a little guarded, like what they felt most comfortable sharing about me. And I didn't realize that I was perceived as so passive, especially towards the end game. A lot of people were talking about how I wouldn't say names, and it was frustrating for them. And I kind of perceived that as like, I'm trying to make people think that my ideas are theirs, and I'm kind of trying to push them. And I'm sure it's a little of column A, little of column B. I know I definitely could be more active in terms of throwing names out, because sometimes I was watching myself back and I was like, okay, now's the time when I throw out a name. And I wouldn't. I was like, oh, what the fuck you did? Like, say something, dude. I'm like, it was interesting to watch myself make a decision that, with the knowledge that I got from playing the game, I wouldn't have made anymore. That was really interesting to see. So I feel like as a player, I'm going to improve from like not only playing this game, because it was a very difficult game to play, and I learned stuff just from playing it, but then from also watching it back and watching my reactions to things, my impulses at the time, calls that I made that were right and calls that I made that were wrong, and also seeing how I was perceived by other players in real time. And after the fact with the podcast, like it was a very full view of my game and how it relates to other players' games. And it was I feel like it's the most educational org experience I've ever had, which I'm super grateful for.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about it is that full disclosure.
Sure.
So watching you play the game, I was aware that obviously you were playing. I don't think there was anyone that truly was not playing.
Of course.
But it wasn't until I actually started to watch your confessionals, because I watched all the raw footage. So the season ended, I watched the raw footage because I had to label all the clips, because it's like, MOV underscore 00096, like whatever. So I had to watch everything. And then I had to figure out, generally everything was pretty organized going into it, but I still had to rename it. So I watched your confessionals and I was like, holy shit. Like you're like, honestly, I was impressed with a number of things that you were saying that I had no clue were even going on in the game. I think one of the number one standout moments for me that stunned me and made me just like cheese super hard was that when you started to talk about everyone's votes and the way that they wrote their votes in the font, I was like, holy shit. Kyle did say something about that, I think, at the Ascension ceremony, but he
Yeah.
really did way before the Ascension ceremony figured out where all the votes were at from that merge, the merge temple. Like, I was stunned. I was, and you weren't the only person I had thought that about, because like my perception of a lot of things at the time was, and full disclosure,
Yeah.
I thought Lauren, when we were running the game, filming the game, I thought
Mhm.
Lauren was just dominating from start to finish.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until I watched the raw footage that I was like, wait, Kyle was in the right mindset. Caro had a lot of good control in day one. And also, along with you, I was most stunned about Andrew. I had no clue that Andrew was the one that was kind of the orchestration behind a lot of that. But I think, I think the big thing about your game is that your head was in the right place almost the entire game. Like, seriously, it was in the right place the entire game. So I think maybe, it could have just been like if you would have I guess put things out there a little bit more. But I feel
It's
like I'm talking way too much
no,
now.
no, no, no.
Yeah.
It's great. I love to hear about myself. It's great. I didn't mean that as like a self-absorbed thing. It's like I love the notes. I love the kind of full picture of how I'm doing because I always want to improve. So I love hearing it. I think yeah, it's and I think that kind of is indicative of how the jury vote went down, right? Like, because like you and I'm sure everybody else clearly perceived Lauren as to be running the game because that's what was visible. And the visibility is such an important thing because if I'm, not to say that Lauren wasn't, because she genuinely was like running the game for a lot of it. Pretty much the whole thing. It's a very deserved win. But like in theory, if I'm running the game, but I'm doing too good of a job of hiding it, that by the time we get to final tribal, I'm saying, oh, I did all this stuff, but all I have to go on is my word because there's no tangible proof because I never executed on the power that I supposedly had. Then all that people in the jury have to go on is the word of someone who is, it's very much in my best interest to say that I ran the game, because of course I would say that at final tribal. So I think I had the right idea, but I think at some point I need to take a little more action and play a little more aggressively, put the name out there, be the first one to bring up a plan and get that plan executed. Like with the Caitlyn vote, I think if I had said Caitlyn's name first instead of Andrew and I had been the one to push for that, I might have gotten more credit for that. Same with the Joe. I didn't want the Joe vote to happen, but if I had like said, we got to get Joe here and I put it together, I think I'd have an easier time at the final tribal claiming those moves because people would be able to check their own experience and reference it against what I'm saying and be like, oh yeah, that checks out. Of course, Kyle said he ran that thing because he told me that this is what's going on. He told me these are where the votes are. So I think because you and I talked about this in my interview where for a long time, like several years of me playing orgs, I would get booted mid-merge. There was a 2-year stretch where I didn't get anything except 7th through 9th. And I was so frustrated by that because I was playing I like a good active strong leader type game and it was getting me booted in the middle of the merge. And every time I go to the jury, people are like, oh, you would have won if you got there. And I was like, fuck, then I just need to get there. So I downplayed my game. In the last 2 games I played, I downplayed it so much to where I wasn't seen as a threat at all. And I got to the end and I got second both times because I was fighting an uphill battle in that final tribal council because I was working against the perception that I'd created the entire game. Suddenly I had to tell people everything you believe about me is false. And it's because I made you believe that way. But like at the same time, that's the only pitch that a real goat has is to try and lie their way out of it. So it's hard to distinguish whether it's true or false unless I do prove that I have agency towards the final stretch at like 7, 6, 5. If I if I make moves with the power that I do have, because I think I had a lot of social capital that I could have used. And I chose not to because I wanted to be underestimated still because I was scared of that final stretch. I think if at a certain point I flip it and I'm no longer under the radar, I put myself over the radar. But at that point, I'm so in control that people can't get me. It's a very finicky timing thing, because if I do it around too early, I could be out just before final tribal. But I think that's the maybe the last little tweak that my game needs to become like a really, really good winning game. Because I think I'm just right there. I was only one vote off this time, and I think I'm right there. I almost have it.
Yeah, and I think that is a very interesting parallel between your game and Caitlin's game. If we think about it for a second, Caitlin on paper was sort of on the bottom day one. So were you. You both made it to day two. Caitlin was almost the vote day one. You were almost the vote day one. You both make it to day two. You're both well liked. You make it to a certain point. But then I think the thing with Caitlin, that I guess what you were kind of just trying to say was, Caitlin's like, I lose if I go to the end. I need to make a move. This is the time to make a move. And I think Caitlin was completely right. I think it could have been the same thing with you, because I think that's the thing. A lot of times with these games, and even in the reality competitions, you do need a little bit of flair. You need at least one seemingly big thing on your resume to prove that you are there. But I do think, while all of you guys performed very well at the Ascension ceremony, I do believe that you actually performed the best, because you had both Joe and Anna, for instance, who weren't sure how they want it to go. And especially Joe, for instance, Anna admits, especially at the reunion, she admitted she's a little bit on the bitter side. But you still managed to convince them. And I don't really think you lied about anything at the Ascension ceremony. You made people laugh. You made people feel comfortable, which was also something people were scared Colin was going to do.
Yeah.
And then you managed to convince them that you had a little bit more control than they thought you had. Mm-hmm. And I think you truly earned those votes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very cool to hear. I thought at the time, I for sure got Joe's. I maybe earned Anna's during the final tribal, but then watching it back with the sticks segments, which were also, that was super cool to include. The stick segments, seeing Joe kind of be torn even as he was casting his final vote, I was like, fuck yeah, okay, cool. Then I'm happy with my final tribal performance. And I think if I did make a single move, no, I didn't make a single fucking move the whole time. No, but if I made like a single visible move, because I made a lot of moves, but they were under the radar moves. If I orchestrated even a single vote, then when I say at other times that I hung back and didn't want to push the vote, it carries more weight, because I proved at some point that I do have the capacity to do so. So anytime that I don't, it becomes a deliberate choice, as opposed to just Kyle is a passive player who doesn't take agency.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now I am curious about one thing. So it's been, I don't know, it's been a little over 5 months now since I've actually seen your interview, and I remember a fair amount of it. But how many of these games have you actually played? Because the only game that I'm actually familiar with you with was Conquest, but you were like the second or third boot.
Mm-hmm. Other than this, I just counted 8 games, and they were all long-term 39-day awards. One was actually like 50 days, but I got voted out on day 39. So wow. 39 days to make. So yeah, it was sort of just my whole org journey, like Conquest. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that you had to get on calls with people. So I was messaging and I got voted out, and I thought I had been overplaying, and it turns out I was voted out because I was inactive. So that's embarrassing, but that's my
first.
Yeah, that was my first game ever.
Okay.
Yeah, and my only pre-merge placement. So I'm pretty happy with that. Once I learned how to play these, I always do pretty well. Is cool, but there's also so much luck involved. So I don't know how much credit I can take for getting over.
Well, I know I still think though that skill, like, I mean, that's the thing. And I've said it on the podcast before, I really want to try and stay away from Survivor talk, but even as Tyson said in Survivor, like, you'd be stupid to think that luck is not involved. Yes. I mean, luck carries a fair amount of it. Like, I've only played a handful of games. I like to kind of really space my games out, but even in my games, while I think I was doing well at playing the game, most of the time I end up getting out because of a twist, or because I got out of the tribe swap and I was in the minority, which actually has happened every single time I believe I've been in the minority at a tribe swap. But anyway, yeah, there's luck. There's definitely luck. But I think your social game was your standout. And I think you also did very well at the competitive game, which is why we gave you the competitor award. You
That
know,
was cool. I was surprised by that, honestly.
yeah, I mean, we definitely want, if I'm being honest, we definitely want back and forth between you and Andrew. And I mean, because the thing is, if you look at everything, you won the reward challenge right at the beginning of the game. You
Yeah.
won the first individual immunity. And even though there wasn't technically like a single winner of the Final Four challenge, you
Yeah.
were the first one to complete it, which also gave you the choice to choose how the order went at the Ascension ceremony. But you also managed to complete it in, I believe the exact time was 2 minutes and 59 seconds, whereas the next like highest time was like 8 minutes and change.
Yeah.
So,
I
like,
went to shower and change after I finished that and still was
yeah.
back where the challenge was done. I should have said that at final tribal. That would have been a flex. Or the
I mean,
ascension
yeah.
ceremony.
Yes, thank you. The Ascension ceremony. But no, I think that's the thing. You did really well competition wise. Your social game allowed you, which my initial thoughts were like, I don't really see Kyle being super social, which did actually leave you kind of in the bottom at the beginning of day one.
Yeah.
But still, you managed to forge the right connections and you played under the radar. You just needed to kind of pop up out of the trenches and take a shot. But other than that, you did play a really, really good game.
Thank you.
So, I guess with that being said, do you have any other final thoughts on your podcast stuff, your experience in the game, the edit?
Well, we touched on luck, and a big thing I got lucky on, and I think it might be single-handedly responsible for me not being booted at 7 is the fact that Anna could not message Caro and Lauren, that Facebook just wouldn't let that happen. I think I might have been booted at 7 because she was a good player who was just hindered by stuff completely out of her control. And I got super lucky there because it was either her or me. So I obviously tried to not mention that at final tribal because that would have sank the shit out of my game. But yeah, the biggest thing I learned from this game is how much of it is really out of my control, which means that with the things that are in my control, there's weirdly less pressure because I know that all I can do is try to increase my odds as much as possible. And from there, it's out of my hands. I can build relationships with as many people as I possibly can. And hopefully those people are put in decision-making spots at points where I just simply am not because of how the game shakes out. So yeah, and I learned a lot from this game. I think I'm super happy with my edit. I think honestly, it gave me a lot more credit than I kind of deserved, which I'm cool with. Like, I also am hypercritical of myself, so maybe that's not even true. I know my own game so intimately that I see every little minute flaw. So I'm sure it's somewhere in the middle. But yeah, it's been a great experience. I'm super happy with it, and the only thing that I would change is one jury vote. Everything else I'm pretty cool with.
Well, I guess out of curiosity, whose vote do you think you would have a chance of changing, or you would try and change?
Well, I think the only juror I really had a shot at was Andrew, because Caitlin and I never talked, and so I don't think I could have given the world's best speech, and I don't think she would have voted for me just because we didn't talk, and that wasn't either of our faults. It was just the same thing that happened to Anna with Caro and Lauren. We just couldn't message. But I don't think I could have flipped her vote because of that, because we didn't really have a strategic relationship throughout the game. And Colin seemed to hate my final tribal. There was one point where I think I said I was throwing challenges and he looked like he was going to throw up. That was that was very funny to me. But I think he was such an advocate for Lauren that I don't think he would have voted for me either. I was personally just proud during my final speech where I said because he said for his jury speech that a final 6 or 5 or something like that was the last chance to get Lauren out, and that we didn't take it. And at that point we had lost the game. And in my final speech, because he didn't let us respond at the time, so I back pocketed that. And I was like, well, whether you like it or not, I'm going to respond in my closing speech. So I did that. And I said, at the end of Survivor, all bets are off. And, everyone's looking out for their individual game. And he did give me it's a good point. And I was like, you know what? I don't have your vote, but I like that you at least understand where I'm coming from. And I'll take that. Because for someone who we were just on such opposite sides strategically, and I think he especially was frustrated with my lack of giving out a name, which is so valid. I'm glad that people express that frustration because that's something I'm going to work on in future games. So I'm grateful for that. But I don't think I had a shot at his vote either. So with those two, Andrew's the only other Lauren vote. I had a really good relationship with Andrew. And I don't know how I could have got his vote, but I think there was maybe a chance. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
maybe if I offered him half the prize money.
We'll have to write that in as illegal to do in the game because I think that is what other reality competitions do. But but anyway, I guess that is it then. I just want to say, I guess before I actually conclude everything, you know, along with your game, I think also a really good part that is a good credit to your game is you talking to Joe and planting seeds in his head, your relationship with Andrew, and your the seeds you also planted in Caro's head, I believe at the final 5, where I believe if I remember correctly, it was like, you know, I think maybe Carol also said it, but I know you also said it too, you know, trying to pin Lauren and Andrew together. But obviously no one was expecting it to be a final 3. No one was expecting there to be a final 4 battle to the final 3. So, and no one was expecting David's dismissal. So a lot of unpredictables.
I'm cool with how it worked out because I think how it would have worked was David would have voted for me. It would have tied, but I think Carol would have voted for Lauren. And I guess
she even said it at the reunion show.
The fact that she's doing the Afterthoughts podcast with Lauren and rather than with me, that tells me where she would have voted. So
yeah, I mean they were from the pretty much the very beginning. They were as thick as thieves. I mean, because even you see during episode 7 or 8, I can't quite remember at this point in time. It was during the Caitlyn boot, so 9, I guess it would have been actually. You know, the second Caitlyn left that room, Caro said, I'd be fine with it being, you know, or Caitlyn. She then said that. So yeah, they were super tight, which also is why they won Best Alliance, because they were an inseparable duo, literally pretty much from start to finish. So
for sure. Yeah. And that's well deserved. Yeah. So I'm at peace because when David was first kicked off the jury, I was like, this is the end of me. But I'm happy that it wouldn't have mattered ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, it would have literally come down to a single vote.
Yeah.
So
as opposed to what it did this time, which was come down to a single vote.
But yeah, I mean, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, no matter what, it would have come down to a single vote, whether it would have been tied and then that. But yeah. But anyway, thank you for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Thank you for playing the game, Kyle, and applying. I love that you did. So yeah, if everyone can make sure they like, comment, and subscribe to Casey Needs a Co-host, and we'll see you for the next Afterthoughts podcast. Have a good night.
Peace out.